Let's go over the homework for workbook page 99, chapter 13, the second chapter on non-chord tones. First, it tells us to go back to example 717 on page 104 in the text. So here we are looking at page 104, Haydn Piano Sonata, just a little snippet of it. And we see that the first non-chord tone is not part of the C chord. It steps up and then leaps down. An escape. Pretty classic. It's diatonic and it's unaccented. And this is a pair of escapes because here's another one. Interestingly, in the third measure, it's the inversion of escape. It leaps and then steps up, and it's on the beat as appoggiaturas typically are, and it's accented. This is an appoggiatura then. APP is how you can abbreviate that, and leaps down to the E and steps up. Don't worry about the rest in between. You, no matter whether there's a rest or not, you go by what the note before is, okay? All right. The next example we're told to look at is on page 156. So moving there, the Beethoven Violin Sonata. Looking at the violin part first in measure 10, we see that it leaps and steps. That's unusual for an appoggiatura to continue in the same direction, but nonetheless, that's what it is, an appoggiatura. And then it leaps in this measure as well to a G that is not part of the chord, even though the G was part of the chord before. So again, another appoggiatura here in the violin part. All right, and then we need to move to the next page where we get 3 passing tones in a row. Your book only gives you a space for 1. I would go ahead and add the other 2. And then the violin part does a passing tone stepping down, right? Then the B is held over into the next beat where it is not part of this D major chord. It's held over and resolves down to the A, which is an octave. So this is a 9/8 suspension. And look, he does it again a measure later. Not really a chain of suspensions because there's something in between, but a pattern nonetheless. So the E is held over and resolves down to the D. The D is held underneath in this D major chord. A 9/8 suspension here as well. But there's lots going on here. Look in the piano part. Kind of a suspension, the reflected glory of the violin. We have a G above the D, which is a 4th, going down to the F sharp. So this is a 4/3 suspension. You can write it this way, or you can write the note where it resolves. Okay, and then notice how we talked about retardations being found at cadences and working with suspensions. So here this C sharp is a retardation and resolves up to the D. So you can just put it somewhere outside right there. All right. On to number 3, page 140, the Mozart String Quartet, one of the many. And we're stepping up here in both parts, passing. A pair of passing tones that does not fit the one chord. Notice this is a viola part, so these are C's, middle C's. Okay? Jumping to measure 24, it leaps up and then steps down, so that's an appoggiatura. Remember, you've played this before with me in the previous quarter. Just didn't realize all the good stuff we were leaving out. Okay, measure 25. And again, this is a pretty obvious passing tone, and then leaps up to an appoggiatura. Remember I mentioned before that a composer tends to use the same non-chord tones several times rather than trying to have a variety show and use some of each. That's what's happening here. Okay, and then in the violin 2, we already talked about this passing tone. What's happening over here though? So we have a B that's part of the chord, and then held over to a B that is not part of the chord, goes up to the C, not part of the chord, and up to the C again. These are all retardations. They're holding over a note from the previous chord and resolving up by step. So retardation 3 times here. Okay? Oh, that was wrong. That's actually a neighbor because it's a C before it as well, isn't it? So C, down, and back up. Let's make this R into an N. Perfect. All right, let's look at part 4 on the same page, the Mozart. We need to analyze the chords and the NCTs simultaneously as we go, really. So we're looking for the root of this chord. Remember, the root is the top of the second. I have an A, C, D, not a complete chord, but the F sharp we'll assume is there. F sharp is the third of the chord. Kind of unusual to have the third missing instead of the fifth. He wanted to keep this sort of Alberti bass pattern going, is why that happened. And we do get the F sharp right away in the next beat. So, this is a 5 chord. I'm seeing that the 5th is in the bass. That makes it a 4-3. Okay? Or you can visualize it if you want to write your A, C, D, and then your F sharp would be up here. So here's the second, right? This is a 4th above, and C to A is a 3rd above, so that gives me a 4-3 inversion. Okay? Then I'm going to the 1 chord here, the G major in root position. Down a 3rd, that will be the 6 minor chord. Again, back to the 1 chord, but with a 3rd in the bass. Okay? Now, I'm looking at the NCTs, but I'd like to go back now and actually talk about them, okay? So here, this G sharp is an NCT. It's going away from the chord note and back to it. That's a neighbor. Then we get some chromatic passing. This is passing, and the B is not part of the chord either. Passing, and the C sharp is not part of the chord. Remember, these non-chord tones can be next to each other or next to chord tones. All right? This is all part of the chord. And then it leaps down to this appoggiatura here. And another pattern where we get 2 leaping appoggiaturas. The D sharp is also one. And I'm looking for another one. This B is not in the chord even though it's on the beat. Well, that's what we would expect for an appoggiatura. And here's the A as part of the chord. The G is not part of the D7 chord. That's a neighbor, a lower neighbor. Okay? Let's catch the chords here that we see in passing. This is a 2 minor, but now it's in first inversion with a 3rd in the bass. If you were to play this, you would catch right away that this is cadential. 1-6-4 to 5-7. Please put the bracket underneath with a 5 and going to 1. Now, looking at the G major chord, we see right away you have 2 notes that are not part of the G chord. And here, finally, we have a neighbor group. NGR is a good way to abbreviate that. Okay, and then the rest you can leave. All right, I hope that was helpful. Talk to you soon.